What you need to know about authenticating cross-border documents and the importance of electronic apostilles. That's the subject of today's ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk.
Welcome to ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk from the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel, a professional society of peer-elected trust and estate lawyers in the United States and around the globe. This series offers professionals best practice advice, insights, and commentary on subjects that affect our profession and clients. And now, our ACTEC fellow host with today's topic.
This is Tony Ann Cruz, ACTEC Fellow from New York. The American College of Trust and Estate Counsel wrote to the National Association of Secretaries of State with support of an initiative for states to implement a process for issuing electronic apostilles. ACTEC Fellows Lee Basha from Washington, D.C., and Gerard Brew from New York will explain ACTEC's support of electronic apostilles and the importance of apostilles generally. Welcome, Lee and Gerard.
This is Gerard, and I suppose I'll start off with Lee. Can you tell us what an apostille is?
Yes, well, this is one word that might be a bit like you say tomato and I say tomato. So the English, usually in America, many pronounce it apostille, but technically it's a French word and it's pronounced apostille. So we can use whatever pronunciation you feel comfortable with on this podcast and for those listening. So an apostille is a form of authentication issued to notarized and to government-issued documents, so either or, for use internationally in countries that participate in the Hague Convention of 1961. And the U.S. State Department issues a list of countries that accept the apostille.
Well, thank you. And that, Lee, reminds me of the distinction. I studied French, and it reminds me of the distinction in our law. People use the word cypre, but actually that's a French term that should be pronounced cypre, but no one does it. So thank you, and I'll use apostille. So what if a country doesn't adopt the apostille?
Well, if they don't, and there are, and I'll go over a few of which ones have and which ones have not, but if a country has not adopted the apostille, then they have to go through a very burdensome process for authenticating a document for use in the other country if they haven't adopted this convention. And it entails this very burdensome 5-step authentication process, including having to go through the civil registry, the Ministry of Justice, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the consulate at the state of origin, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs at the state of origin, and so on, which is time-consuming, as you can imagine. By contrast, with the apostille process, a public document or a notarized one that is being authenticated that is executed in the state of origin is apostilled by the competent authority in the state of origin. So the apostille can be verified by the receiving authority in a register. And then the public document is ready to be produced or be used in the state of destination. So it's a much simpler process.
Well, thank you. And how many parties or countries are participants in the Apostille Convention?
Well, it's changing, it's growing, but currently there are approximately 124 countries that participate in the apostille. And these include all of the United States, Mexico, Central America, pretty much all of South America, Russia, Europe, Australia, and parts of Africa, like mostly in the South, including South Africa. I would say, looking at the map, the notable exceptions that have not signed on to this are China, most of Africa, and oddly, Canada. But the rest of the world pretty much has adopted it. So it's really taken hold in the majority of countries.
Well, this certainly is a concept that most practicing lawyers and people involved with international aspects of the state should be familiar with. So where does the practicing lawyer find this Apostille Convention?
Well, it's found in the Hague Conference on Private International Law, which the acronym now is HCCH, Apostille Convention. And that organization is an intergovernmental organization in the area of private international law that administers several international conventions and protocols. And it's been around for a long time. It was founded in 1893. And the HCCH also has other conventions leading to cross-border legal cooperation. So the Apostilles Convention abolishes the traditional cumbersome legalization process using a single formality. And so the issuance of the certificate is called an apostille. And an apostille issued by the state of origin authenticates the origin of a public document or one that was notarized in that jurisdiction so that it can be presented abroad in another contracting state. So it's always used in the international context. You wouldn't have a document apostille and then use in Texas, for example, and then use it in New York. It's always in a cross-border context. And it's used to facilitate the circulation of public documents internationally for individuals, families, and businesses. And those that use the Apostille Convention, it's estimated that there's a reduction of time and cost saved for officials and the users alike to be approximately $500 million. So it's not insignificant by any means.
This sounds like a process by which a document within the U.S. from one state is certified or authenticated for use in another state. So, Lee, can you give us some examples of when an apostille is used?
Yes. In fact, I'm working on one currently where we had to get quite a number of documents apostilled for an international estate. So in this example, just using it as a situation, there was a U.S. citizen who died owning property in France, and to transfer title to the French property to the decedent's wife pursuant to his will, we needed to provide to the French civil law notary, referred to as the notaire, a certificate. Listen to all the things we had to get and have them all apostilled. So a certificate of birth for both the decedent, for each of the descendants, and for the surviving spouse, the decedent's death certificate, their marriage license, the will, and all of its codicils, the certificate of qualification in the state where it was being probated. So it was quite a number of documents that needed to be apostilled and then sent to France. So having it, be apostilled, if it had only been electronic, it would have been even easier. But as an example, just to show you what it reads, it's very simple. The document. So in this instance, it was a Texas decedent and a Texas probate. And so it reads, and I think this is just helpful to sort of hear what it actually sounds like. The state of Texas Secretary of State, not for use within the United States of America, this apostille only certifies the signature, the capacity of the signer, and the seal or stamp it seals. It does not certify the content of the document for which it was issued. Certificate validation is available at the www.sos.state.tex.us. And so it basically certifies that it was issued, who signed the public document, in what capacity the signer was acting, the stamp it bears, the date it was certified, and the signature of the Secretary of State. That is an apostille in a nutshell.
Well, that's very helpful. And I know, Lee, one of your initiatives has been to work on allowing for this to happen in an electronic fashion. Can you tell us a little bit about what is known as the e-app, APP?
Yes. So thank you, Gerard. The e-app is an electronic apostille. So, just like we've seen how technology can work during the shutdown of the coronavirus situation for the last few years, and how important it was to have the ability to do things electronic, including sometimes, Zoom qualifications for executors, electronic notarizations. They're talking about e-wills. Well, here we're in the context of the e-apostille or the e-app, which seeks to promote and encourage the use of technology under the Apostille Convention, because it will improve accessibility and usability and streamline the work processes of the competent authorities. So it's helpful for them, and it's obviously helpful for the end user, the consumer. We, as the attorneys and the advisors, and trying to get these documents for our clients to be used in whatever context, whether it's a business context, using for a succession or anything along those lines. And it also generates more user-friendly apostilles and enhances the security of the cross-border transfer of documents. There are actually two parts to the e-app. One part is the actual e-apostille, and the other is the e-register. But together they're referred to sort of as the e-app. The e-apostille is a certificate issued in electronic form, signed in an electronic signature with a digital certificate. But the e-apostille may also be issued on electronic documents or on paper documents that have been scanned and converted into electronic form.
Well, with the growing number of cross-border estate matters and the example you described, Lee, it seems to be becoming increasingly common. I very much think this topic deserves sustained attention. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the e-register works?
Yeah, so the e-register, which actually right now is more common than the e-app in some jurisdictions, it's maintained in a public, accessible electronic form. So it would allow any interested person to verify the apostille online. And again, just to mention, the documents that are generally being apostilled are public documents. So it's not a concern that, oh my gosh, now somebody can go see that this was their birth certificate. Well, birth certificates you can get. That's, it's issued by a particular state, for example, in the U.S. So while many contracting parties maintain electronic registers, the publicly accessible element is what determines whether it will be classified as an e-register. And so far, the implementation of the e-app is about 22, with e-registers being 29. And then in the U.S., there are 12 e-registers. And only one state so far has both the e-apostille and the e-register, and that is Montana. So hats off to Montana, I must say. So the apostille validly issued by one contracting party must be accepted by other contracting parties, including obviously the e-apostille, not just the regular apostille. So they have the same requirements as a paper apostille under the convention.
What does it take to implement the e-app?
I'm really glad you asked that question, because there is no requirement for endorsement, approval, any legislative action. It is already specified in the convention. So the U.S. already has, remote notarization, online notarization, electronic notarization, depending on the state. And we have learned from the pandemic that using technology to handle such matters provides a huge benefit. And there's nothing that needs to be passed. Each state, the Secretary of State, just needs to basically get the software and start making it available, the electronic apostille.
Wow. Well, this sounds like something we should work to get implemented, and I know you have been, Lee. What can we do to get this implemented fully in states other than Montana?
Yes, well, we are trying. So we need to really motivate the U.S. Secretary of State to implement the e-app and start issuing the e-app apostilles. NAS, which is the National Association of Secretaries of State, just recently in July of this year, so this summer, passed a resolution recommending that the states implement a process for issuing electronic apostilles. So that was really, I think, a watershed landmark in recognition of how important this is, and for the association to tell the secretaries of state, we are recommending this, you should go forward and start implementing it in your state, goes a long way. And we're really hoping that we'll see some progress now that that's been passed.
And how can ACTEC help with that process?
Well, first off, ACTEC has already helped in supporting the e-app and e-register by writing to NAS, the National Association of Secretaries of State, and ACTEC's support in this initiative, as well as that of other organizations, including for example, the American Association of Matrimonial Lawyers and the like, and businesses are really calling this to light. And NAS took notice and then ended up passing this resolution. And now it's up to the states to do so. So let's stay tuned.
Well, and that it does take us to the states, and I had the opportunity to work with you, Lee, in getting the state chairs to consider this issue. So what can we do within the college to have more states work on passing it?
when this happened, and Gerard, I appreciate your help on that, because you encouraged the state chairs to write to the secretaries of state. But you will recall that was roughly around the whole issue with the election. And so they were a bit preoccupied, I'm afraid. And therefore, they taking this on, they may have, just had to deal with one priority over another. But now that things hopefully have settled down, that they will take a second look at this, and that the states and the secretaries of state will do so. And it may be a good time for the ACTEC state chairs to, at the state level, whether they're writing, the state chairs are writing again to the secretaries of state. And I know some secretaries of state, there's been some turnover. So not all the secretaries of state who may have received the letter about 2 years ago are still in that role. And so I think it's about time to perhaps seek to have more attention given to this and possibly have the states go forward and implement it.
And I think that would be a wonderful thing to put on the agenda for the State Chair Steering Committee again, Lee, given so many things went on during the pandemic. And I know Melissa Wilms, who's now my successor, would, I'm sure, be interested in doing that. Are there any states that you would like to see implement this process first?
Actually, we would like to see all states implement the e-app, but I think the priorities would be some of the big ticket locations, including Virginia, because they had the electronic notarization, one of the first to do that, even pre-pandemic. Texas, Florida, Delaware, New York, Ohio, and Missouri have all been identified as good candidates for implementation. And we hope that, like the Nike saying, just do it. That's all it takes. The technology is there, and the cost should not be that great. And in fact, it should frankly be less, because it's going to save all around on Federal Express charges or somebody physically going to the office to have it apostilled, the time, the effort, and the like. That it's this is actually a problem that has a solution that does not require legislative activity, just a bit of time to implement the electronic e-app and the e-register, and, the bit of money to purchase a license for the software, which has already been developed by providers. And frankly, this could serve as a source of revenue for the state as a convenience that could possibly generate more funds than the current physical paper version. So, for example, in Massachusetts, the cost of an actual paper apostille is, it's only $6, but you add in parking, cost to send a paralegal over, and the current situation is actually much more expensive than if you could just go online and do it.
Well, on behalf of ACTEC, Lee, I very much think that you deserve a great deal of credit for taking on the initiatives and your role in the international estate planning area to bring this process about and bring it to everyone's attention. What more can we do to get the word out to make this happen?
Well, thank you, Gerard. And it was, when you were the state chair committee chair, your help and support really meant a lot. And then Ann Burns wrote a letter of support, and so did when she was president. And then, Robert Goldman did also, and all of that is very, very helpful. But we can write to the secretaries of state encouraging immediate implementation and hoping that the momentum will build, and the electronic apostille and electronic register will soon be available for everybody in all states. So thank you so much, Gerard, for your support and for ACTEC and helping support this initiative. And for those who work in the international arena, as I do, I can just affirm that we use apostilles all the time, constantly. And so having it, take advantage of technology instead of being, stuck in the dark ages would really advance and help international practitioners and their clients alike. So thank you for this opportunity to share this dialogue, Gerard. I really appreciate it.
And thank you very much for all of your efforts in educating us today and in general on this field. I think it's something that really does deserve sustained attention. So thank you, Lee, for everything you've done.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And to keep with our French theme, merci beaucoup for all of your time. Lee and Gerard, for this informative discussion. I agree that this is an important issue, and I hope we can keep some focus on it. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to this episode of ACTEC Trust and Estate Talk, the podcast series about wealth planning matters from the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel. To find an ACTEC lawyer near you, visit actec.org. Please subscribe to this series and leave us a rating or a review. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at ACTEC Talk.